we're going to be talking about culture and diversity. We're talking about it in terms of organizational culture, as well as looking at culture as we see it as South Africans and how it pertains to our organizations themselves. And then the diversity within that. What does that mean? Now, it's going to be quite a really impactful discussion. So what we'd love for you to do is to interact with us in the sort of networking breaks at the end of the day and that sort of thing throughout the conference. Make sure that you've got the Lumi app open, the Events by Lumi app. So any questions you might have, we will definitely get back to you on those. Now, let's go straight into a very simple question, and it's going to be one of the most difficult ones. I'll address Justin first because I'm obviously a chauvinist. But I think that just to sort of talk across the panel, we do have quite a diverse panel here. What do you believe culture means? Because I think it's a tough thing to go into something and then we've just sort of made an assumption as to what it is.
So we thought we'd do a panel discussion on diversity and start with the white male, right?
Yes.
Didn't we learn anything from Danny and Cabello about white privilege?
It might be the last time you speak about it.
Yes, it might be at this rate. I shouldn't expect an invitation back. What was the question?
What do we understand by culture, especially organizational culture?
So, here's the thing. I mean, culture, I think one of the problems of thinking about culture is it's this kind of add-on to a company. Culture is the company. Yeah. There's no culture is the way we do things around here. And so you might have a really toxic culture, you might have an inspirational culture, but we've all got culture, right? And Danny and Cabello reminded us, I love that quote from Mendoza, right? You got your culture, I got our culture. And in fact, I mean, there's a great concept in marriage counseling. You never thought you would leave here with a few tips and tools to...
you never know what you're going to get at the USB showcase.
But I think this is important because there's a concept in marriage counseling that when two people come together in a relationship, you've actually got two different cultures. Right? And if we talk about the way we do things around here, doesn't matter if you're both Muslim, both Jewish, you will come from different families where there are different ways of doing things around here. And what is so extraordinary to me is that as organizations, we can bring people together, forget race and gender and religion, but just individuals who have been brought up doing things very differently and bring them into a group where they can start not to do things the same way, but start to create some common culture, some common ways of doing things. So really, in essence, it's what we do. It's a lot less about what we say, because we all know we can say one thing and do something else, and far more about what we do.
But what I love about what you've said there, and I'll ask you, Deshaun, this, because we've sort of defined what culture is, at least what it means to Justin, but why is it so important now? Why is culture so relevant from an organizational perspective, but also added to that, why should culture be diverse? Why should diversity be part of that?
Well, I mean, if you pick up on what Justin just mentioned, it's the way we do things around here, but that's the essence of it is, if you put business together, you've got the functional, which is your structures, your systems, all the things that make the business work, and you've got your interpersonal, which is all the people coming from all their various backgrounds, worldviews, value systems. And why it's relevant right now is that I think the world is in a place where it's never been more diverse. South Africa is one of the most diverse countries in the world. And so actually, I think we can teach the world a thing or two. But we also get it wrong. And I think why culture is important for us to really grapple with is what is it that we can bust? What are some of those myths, some of those subconscious biases? What are some of the conversations that we're trying to avoid but are important for us to have? So that the interpersonal can actually fit in with the functional. The functionality of business is there. There's nothing we can do. Well, I suppose we can change structures and systems. But given the structure and system of a business, how can we use the interpersonal to actually drive culture, drive it effectively, and use all the difference that we have and package that for the world? I really think that South Africa has that unique capability, but we really need to be able to grapple with it for ourselves. And I think grappling is often a very uncomfortable process. So culture, very, very important for right now.
And it definitely is. And I know, Bev, you talk about this a lot because you talk about, the things that businesses need to do in order to get the right culture fit and make sure that they've got the right sort of identity that they're putting out there. What are some of the things that we can do to bring about the right kinds of culture? How can culture be cultivated?
I think that as I've looked at business going into the future, and this is where I am really excited about the panel that we have at USB, because we speak about disruption, we speak about business, performance, etc. But the one word that always comes up is culture in just about everybody's keynote. And the World Economic Forum said that people are now probably our most important source of competitive advantage. And in the old days, it was your people are your greatest assets, but let's treat them like machines. And I think that is essentially what has changed, is that we need to start looking at people. And as Justin said earlier, we see culture as a thing. All right. A culture is a living, breathing, everyday dynamic. And not every company doesn't have a culture. It is always changing. But it comes down to the individual, the quality of leadership that we have, the quality of the conversations that we're having, not only the big ones, but every single day. So it's bringing that people into the human space.
Okay, and I guess this is where, in fact, I was just about to ask you, Justin, because in essence it comes down to the individual as well, doesn't it? And doesn't
it's the individual, but here's the thing. There's I did an event in Turkey last year. They got an old saying there: "The fish rots from the head down." I wanted to say that to our ex-presidents. Did you notice Jacob Zuma loved to talk about corruption? No, we must not be corrupt. I mean, according to Dr. Freud, it was like a weird thing. He spoke about it a lot. And here's the thing. Your people will not do what you say. They will do what you do. They will do what you do. What happened? You saw this in the NEC. ANC meetings generally ran late. Why did they run late? Because President Zuma came in late. That's the way we do things right. President Ramaphosa, first meeting he has, he's on time. People are now late because they expect it's all going to be, because that's the way we do things around here. That was the last time anybody was late, right? From then on, everybody gets here on time. And President Ramaphosa made the point. He was very clear. This is the way we do things from now on. Your time is as valuable as mine.
Okay, but to butt in here, because doesn't that also make the point that Bev is making, in the sense that that comes down to the individual as well? She's not necessarily saying that one person in an organization, as the lowly employee, makes the decisions around what culture is. It comes down to the individual who is at the top and the leadership level. So in essence, isn't that also part and parcel of what we're saying?
I kind of want to disagree a bit with Justin here, because I think there is the element of leadership driving the way culture can be shaped. But, to a certain point, leadership has its limitations. So it really does come down to, number one, I think in the recruiting process, do you find people who actually fit the kind of excellence, the effectiveness you want for your organization? That can influence the leader to create a different setup for culture, for the kind of culture that you want. So you're quite right that the fish can rot from the top, but I think there is the dynamic of having the right people, the right fit, and that comes down to the individual. And if you have a number of individuals that buy in, that align to a strategic vision, the leader can actually exit because the culture doesn't fit that leader anymore. And I think that's really what we should move away from, this idea that leaders are the only people who can really help us to change and transform and create the culture that we want. It's a 20th century dynamic, the whole thing, that the leader needs to decide how things get done around here.
So you're talking about changing the shape of the pyramid.
Absolutely. So the followers in an organization have just as much gravitas as long as you've got enough of a critical mass of people who buy into the same idea and who align themselves to that idea with vision, with purpose, with a value set, and with a worldview. The leader might not be a fit and they might move out. So, for me, it's to flip the whole thing upside down and say, what is our assumption about leadership that make us think that leadership or leaders are the only people in leadership positions are the only people who can drive culture?
Bev, is this something that you agree with?
I think for me it's probably a both and. Because leadership for me is an interesting thing. It's not a positional concept. We talk about leaders rotting from the head. That's functional leadership. I think as our organizations are starting to flatten, young people coming into the workplace are wanting to be heard. They're wanting to have meaning. we actually need to get into a culture where leaders are leading leaders.
Yes.
So as leaders, we should be saying to the individuals in our organization, so it's about both me as the individual and what do I bring to the culture. There is no doubt that leaders shape the conversation and the culture in a company. You will see it. Obama-Trump is an ideal example. The whole culture of a country has changed. That happens at an organizational level, at family level. So leadership is vitally important. And it's the conversations not only that happen at work, but if you really want to know how good your leadership is, listen to the conversations in the taxis going home and around the dinner table. But I think that there is a bottom-up element to culture that is what is making culture so dynamic and so powerful as we go into this discussion.
I love that. I love that.
Can I share an example here? So, I mean, firstly, I'm all for flatter structures. I think there's a problem with the sort of hierarchical leadership structure that we've seen, command and control. In fact, we know effective corporate cultures are much more collaborative than that. However, just to really bring this home, I mean, I've had the privilege to work with what is ranked as the most inspirational company in Africa by the Barrett Survey, and that's PEP. And I've had the privilege to do a lot of work with PEP and spend a lot of time with them. So I got a lot of great culture stories from PEP, but let me share this one with you. So we land up in a little African country, and my client says to me, we had the biggest stock losses in this country. Biggest stock losses, it was like 15%. That means everybody's stealing. Everyone's stealing. Says today, we have near zero stock losses. I said, what do you do? Fire everyone, bring in extra security. He said, no, we actually reduce some security. Security tells people you don't trust them. So before we did that, what we established was that some of our key managers were abusive, were stealing. Removed those managers, brought in our PEP culture. PEP's got a very, very specific culture. Brought in that culture. 90% of the people who were stealing are still there, but are not stealing anymore. And I just love this because what it tells you is that with this notion that some people are bad and some people are good, we can all go either way. And the way that they put it, they say, listen, what we found is that about, I think their figure is 2.5%. I don't think it's much more than that. 2.5% of people will always steal, no matter what. 2.5% of people will never steal, no matter what. 95% can go either way, depending on the culture, depending on the way we do things around here. Now, I know we're all in the 2.5% who would never steal.
Speak for yourself, Justin.
Right.
I'm about to steal your time. But I think that what's great about that example is that what it says is an organization can change holistically once you start making the right kinds of decisions. And then those decisions then filter through to the people at the bottom. And isn't this what we all want from our conferences, is that somebody comes to a conference, they hear a panel like this, and then the leadership hears that, hey, we can actually make wholesale changes. You almost want the ANC top brass to be in here. Be like, well, hang on. Maybe we don't need to take out the ones that we think are the problems, but rather just change the way we do things. And isn't this what we're talking about, Deshaun? Because in essence, we're talking about a system that allows for people to be themselves, but also allows for them to be their best selves.
Yeah, you see, Cyrus, I think we must guard against the idea that now there's going to be chaos because no one actually drives the bus and you don't get to tell people what to do. It's not that. It's about finding the right structures to adapt to the way the 21st century worker wants to be interacted with. So working systems globally are changing. We've got structures like Holacracy, which is really kind of a gig-type working structure within an organization, circular systems, project-based systems, which most of our clients here are already using. So given that context and the idea that there's a disintegration of the command control system, people want to be interacted with differently in the workplace. And I would venture to suggest that the way to do that is through the very simple but very structured way of having conversations that drive the change that we want. So yes, you can change management. Yes, you can do some business structure changes. But every single day we're talking to each other. But what kind of talk is it? Is it quality talk? Does it drive effectiveness? Is it structured? Can you kind of create a culture around the way we speak around here, the way we speak of each other, the way we speak to each other, and the way that speaking drives performance? And I think here we don't rely on managers anymore to be those people who are taught how to do the conversation. We rely on the whole organization to do it. And this is where you get that mobilization of people talking, speaking to each other in a way that says this is how we do things around here, but at a much higher level of effectiveness than we've done in a command control system.
You know, you've really hit on a point here that talks to some of the stuff that I talk about in my talk that I give, Leading in the Winner's Circle, where communication being key, but also the types of communication. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned from the sporting world in particular, because a coach only has so much time to convey a message. And that message has to be then taken up by the people who are in the team. Now, if you can't get your message across effectively, how is anybody within your team supposed to perform? And so you'll find that there will always be disconnects. Shouting on the sidelines isn't going to change things. And that's why you find, especially, I find these coaches who stand on the side of the pitch and they're kicking water bottles all over the place. It's all theatrics. Because at the end of the day, what they're trying to convey is the emotion of unhappiness, rather than trying to say, you need to stop marking that guy so closely, or stay away from here. And I think, Bev, that also comes down to creating a culture where what you're doing in your communication is you're allowing people to trust. And then you're collaborating with them.
Absolutely, and I think this is what the beauty of culture is for me, because I want culture to move away from being a program to a moment-by-moment interaction. And I think one of my greatest aha moments, I talk about something called conversational magic. Because when we speak a future into being. So every conversation that you have at work is making a difference. So I want to ask the audience a quick question. Who loves coming, show of hands please, who loves coming to work on Mondays?
Ooh.
I can't believe it's all of them.
I can see a couple of hands. All right. Fridays, do you have to make sure that the stampede going home on Fridays is something that you either have to get out early to get ahead of the stampede? And the question is, we spend 9, 10 hours, sometimes a day. If you have your own business, it's 14 or 15 hours a day at work. And yet we don't focus on that word happiness that we were talking about. And so from the work I do in conversational intelligence, and it's how do we build trust? How do we build relationship? Because those two things for me are the center of culture. And how do we do it in every conversation? We wait until things go wrong or we want to have the big conversation, rather than the conversation starting from the moment you step into your organization to where you switch out the lights and put out the cats at night. Every single conversation is building that culture. And the beauty of it is that you don't have to have a title. Because how many of you would like your voices to be heard?
And that's the point.
You know, Bev, you were talking about happiness, and the Parnassus Workplace Fund only invests in happy companies, has a 7% higher return than average. Your ultimate employee perk is a happy employee, right? I mean, if you're happy, you're going to... And what we know from the neuroscience is that when you're happy, you're more productive. Happy people sell 58% more. They're 29% more productive. And, just something practical. Because I think sometimes when we talk about culture, it's like, oh, it's the group, it's the organization, No, to your point, it's each and every one of us. Each and every one of us. But here's one thing you can do to boost your culture. One of the things we know about successful corporate cultures is that a lot of them describe themselves as family. There's very high sense of belonging, connection, and attachment. So that's why a lot of the relationship building stuff that you talk about, that I think interpersonal skills is so critical. And let me give you one way to immediately, as you as an individual, to get out there and boost your culture. And that is a little thing called recognition. The number one reason people leave a group is because of a lack of appreciation. They feel unacknowledged, they feel, quite frankly, rejected. Basically, you've got, in broad terms, two kinds of cues: rejection cues or acceptance cues. And our biggest social drive is to be accepted by our community, our organization, our family, our partner. And let me tell you, the best way to get is to give. Because I sometimes share this, people say, you're so right. I once shared this at an organization, and I said the biggest factor people leave a job, lack of appreciation. Do you know that the audience started applauding with frowns on their face? Because they were saying, we're not getting it.
Yeah.
And I had to take a moment and say, this is not, to your point, top down. Every one of us has the opportunity to do this.
Absolutely.
Make a commitment that every day you will catch 3 people doing something right. We're really good at catching people doing things wrong. Catch somebody doing something right. Let them know that you've had, hey, well done. I appreciate you. You're important to me. Just acknowledge and see the boost that it has on them, right? They feel better. There's the mirror neuron network, so you start mirroring that positive emotion. And what gets appreciated gets repeated. Nobody ever comes up and says, thank you so much for my salary this month.
Oh, no, some people do.
Fair enough. But just about everybody. I shared this recently at an event. Guy said, that I've still got a note that a CEO gave me 20 years ago. Just to say, hey, thank you so much. Really great to have you on our team. He said, I kept that note. That's how important appreciation, belonging, acceptance is.
I like that because currently we're all on social media. And, technology enables us to do that now with such ease. So you don't have to write the note anymore, Justin. But, that's the thing is you can literally send someone a WhatsApp, a high five, a like. There's so many interesting and innovative ways in which we can really engage with each other in the 21st century workplace that it doesn't have to be an old school, hard, difficult thing that requires so much effort for us to acknowledge each other. But, we're talking here about diversity and driving diversity, and look at all the elements that came out of that. It is about acknowledging individuals. It's about allowing people to let you know who they are before you come in with your subconscious bias with Cyrus must be and form your own opinions around that. And I think so much of how we drive diversity in culture is about allowing people to fill in the blanks for you. Start with a blank slate. Let them know. Let them teach you who they are. But we find so much effort in that for some reason, and it doesn't have to be, because people love to tell their stories. People love to tell their stories. And so my job, if I'm interested in driving diversity in culture, is to be curious about the people who work with me.
The curiosity is critical. And I think that one of the things that we have to do is talk about diversity as being one of the key topics within this area, because culture is one thing. And it's one thing to build and to create and to cultivate. But there has to be a sort of diversity within that. And the reason I say this is that it has to come from the diversity of voices being heard. Not necessarily in terms of just people being there for people's sake.
Yeah.
People often do that. You'll find that you go to workplaces and be like, oh, you can definitely tell there are a lot of men in a room. I definitely feel it. I know that some women walk into a space and immediately turn around and say, yeah, not for me. But then you also have other places where people feel uncomfortable and discomfort because they don't feel as if they'll be heard, they'll be taken seriously, or they'll be working in the correct manner with people who don't understand them culturally, right? And so how important is it for us to have diversity in voices, Bev?
I think I just want to pick up on what Deshaun and Jason are talking about in terms of we've got to look at diversity differently in this country. I've been getting very concerned about how polarized conversations are getting. It's almost about the conversations we can't have rather than the conversations that we are having. What I loved about that thing is to be curious. There's a lovely concept called the beginner's mind, where you come to a conversation with the mind of a child and just listen and be curious. And I've been asking the questions, how can we change the conversation? We've been having the black-white, male-female. I love that slide of Danny's and Cabello's that they put up. Diversity is a rich thing. It's not just a black and white thing. We're not looking for what we have in common. And I was very privileged at the beginning of this year. I worked with a coach in Iceland for a year. And she started a movement, a global movement called No More Boxes. And I've been looking for a vehicle for conversations. How do we unpack the conversation around gender diversity? You know, Cyrus and I can walk into a room and you'll say, Cyrus will show up with a male energy. I will show up with female energy. That's not the case. He might have a very soft, gentle side, which is seen as feminine.
And I do sometimes.
All right. And I, for those people who know me, know that I can be quite assertive if I put my mind to it.
And she is sometimes.
And I am sometimes. So how do we unpack these boxes in a way that there's a safe space, in a way that we can do it with respect, where we are putting aside those unconscious biases? And Jason, Justin, I'm probably handing over to you because it's something that we've spoken out about a lot, is that conversations are more about listening than they are about speaking. And when we listen deeply, not only to the conversations we're hearing from others, but to our own internal voices, that's where we uncover those biases.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes, obviously South Africa has a very painful history. There's a lot that we need to do to rectify this. But let's not assume that racial diversity is, and the term in the literature is cognitive diversity. I mean, you could be a white person and a black person and be very similar. There's a lot of white people out there I'm nothing like, and I'm sure this idea that, because you're black, you now fully represent. I mean, that's kind of racist anyway, isn't it?
It is, and for me, part of the issue with creating diversity workshops and diversity training is exactly that. You start on a premise that there's a stereotype that you need to familiarize yourself with, because there's a homogenous identity around white males or black females or people of this persuasion. So guys, if I can just say one thing here.
The soapbox is yours.
Let us not call it diversity training, because we start on a prejudice. We start on a subconscious bias. We need to call it something else. But it cannot be where you teach people that a handshake goes like this if you come across a person that you assume is Zulu, Xhosa, because...
There's a lot of problems.
They may not be.
And that's the thing. There's a lot of problems within how we view diversity, because it is then termed a certain way, and then we deal with it in that way within an organization. We're running out of time.
Can I quickly just on this point?
He's always going to make a point.
It's going to be a quick one.
But it's going to be a good point.
Because I really feel it's so important that people get practical tools. Like there's the one, every day find 3 people to appreciate. You're going to build a family. You're going
curious.
Correct. So to yours, here's the thing, and I've seen this work. Talk about storytelling. People do business with people they know, trust, and like. If I don't know you, I can't trust you. And if I don't trust you, I don't like you. Get to know people, not just what they do in the office. What did you do this weekend? What do you like? What don't you like? What we know is the moment we know about one another interpersonally. I do a program called Pitch 2, and these guys come often. I'm coaching them from different parts of the world on these multi-million-dollar pitches. I can tell you, until we take a couple of hours just to share personal stories that have nothing to do with work. Somebody's going through a tough divorce. Somebody's got a passion for the piano. Suddenly, now that I know you, I can empathize with you. When I empathize with you, I want to go and bat for you. I'm going to be there for you. But if I don't know you, I'm in this...
I've often said to people, tell me your story, and you will be surprised at how much you get. You just say, tell me your story, and it is about know, like, and trust. But once you have that, people are willing to tell their stories. And then you can dispel any subconscious bias, any tolerance ideas of how we need to, skirt around each other because of our differences. Once you get to know people, it's a lot easier to drive performance in an organization.
That is so true. Bev, in closing, what do you think are some of the next steps people need to take?
I think the next steps from my side is let's build trust and relationship. Let's get to the heart of culture. And so just one conversational technique I'm going to give you, because I do a lot of the neuroscience work around conversation and how to have them well, is every conversation that you have, find out what you've got in common. Let's focus on what we share rather than how we're different. Let's maybe just do that slightly differently this week and see what emerges. And to start focusing on the heart of things. Stop being offended. Stop being judgmental. Let's actually get together and realize that we have 2 people in the room, and then we have a collective conversation, which ultimately is what culture is.
That's beautiful. Justin, what is your takeaway?
In a nutshell.
Be quick.
I mean, to pick up from Bev, yes, a lot of our because somebody has done something that you don't like, it's usually because they have different rules. They come from a different culture. I'm not talking racial, I'm talking individual. There are individual cultures here. So let's get out there and take responsibility. Let's lead without a title and make our difference. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is in the way that we interact with others by appreciating, acknowledging, being curious, getting to know that individual rather than that race or gender.
Deshaun?
So my final take home, because I'm so passionate about driving performance in a way that's not rah-rah. Conversations are essential. Getting to know people are essential. But I know we're all here to be able to say, there's the number, that's the productivity. Justin throws out a lot of statistics. How do we measure that we've actually made a shift? And so my passion is in that area. It's great that we can have the conversations. How do we equip ourselves to have them? How do we measure that we've made the shift? And so for me, if I come into your organization, I can assist you with doing that.
Oh, that's perfect. I think for us, I'd like to just wrap it up by saying, one of the things that we love about this panel is that all of our speakers here talk on varied subjects. But we're able to come into an organization and help you with some of the issues that you might have around topics like culture and diversity. So ladies and gentlemen, please, a round of applause for our esteemed panel.